far.
So the big change in frame of mind. Let's start from the Haggadah anyway, so that we have some context. And what's the center point of the entire Haggadah? So everybody will give a different answer. So I'll give you one possible answer. And a possible answer is that the center point is this medrash, or story that we have in the middle of the Haggadah, that doesn't have any other source. Sometimes when you have something that doesn't have any other source, that this is the only source in the world that says this. So it's like telling you, here's my really rare book that I have. Nobody else has this. So this is the centerpiece. So the story is the famous story that Rabbi Akiva was sitting with Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah and Rabbi Yoshua and two others, and they were sitting in Bnei Brak, and they were having the Seder night. And they were discussing Yetzias Mitzrayim the whole night. And at some point, their students came in and said, "Rabotenu hagia hazman kriyat shema shacharit," that it's now time to. It's already dawn, and it's about to be time to say Shachris. Why do they say that? It's not because they were so worried about Shachris. It's still time, but because the two biggest disputants in the time of the Tanaim, time of the Mishnah, about how to do the Seder night, are Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah. And Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, his shita is that you can't continue the Seder after midnight in any respect. And he learns this from the Korban. The Korban, the Paschal lamb, you can only eat it until midnight. And after that, it's not forbidden. There's nothing wrong with eating it later. But Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, he goes by the shita, which interestingly is not his. It's from the person that he replaced, Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel, that whenever there's a mitzvah that you can only do until the morning, until dawn, you have to stop at midnight. In order to distance a person from transgressing. So what would be the transgression? It's a very serious transgression. If you eat the Paschal lamb after dawn, it's a kares. It's quite serious. It's about as serious as it gets. So to distance us from that possibility, as far as he's concerned, Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, it's a deoraisa mamish, not to eat after chatzos. Because of that, he also says you can't eat matzah after chatzos. That's a little bit more complex how to get to, but the idea is pretty much the same idea, that if I would allow you to continue eating matzah, you'd eventually take another piece from the from the lamb. But because of that, he also says at least it's like a chumrah. It's his chumrah, but it's a very serious one for him, that lechatchila you shouldn't continue to talk about Yetzias Mitzrayim after Chatzos either. What happens in this story?
Well, what's the reason for that?
Again, to ensure that you don't continue on and bring yourself to go, as far as he's concerned, the Chatzos thing is almost like a deoraisa, because the severity of continuing to eat the Korban Pesach into the next day, it's called notar, is mamash akares. So he's very, very strict about it. But Rabbi Akiva, his whole shita is completely different, and he says, so what? You can continue eating the Paschal lamb. The chatchila you should finish at midnight, but you can continue until the morning, and just don't eat. He's not so just take it away at some point. That's all. But because of that, he also says you can continue eating matzah until the morning. There's another thing there. The question is, when do we perform the mitzvah of matzah? Do we perform the mitzvah of matzah when we first eat it, or do we perform it with the afikoman? Which one is the mitzvah? It's very interesting because we say the bracha in the beginning. So Sfardim will hold, most of the Sfardim hold, that it's the Fikomen, it's not the first one. So they don't speak if they know. Some of them don't know, but if they know, so they can't speak the whole Seder. Meaning from the moment they start eating until the Afikomen, they don't speak. Before that, you say the whole Haggadah. By the way, it also seems to be that's why the Haggadah is before the food, which doesn't make any sense, right? Because everybody's really hungry. So why are you drawing it out? Nobody has the patience to really say anything about the Haggadah because we want to go eat. But the reasoning was that if you hold that the matzah mitzvah is dafka the end, not the beginning, then you can't speak the whole Shulchan Aruch. And if you can't speak the whole Shulchan Aruch, so you have to say the whole Magid before.
But during the Beit HaMikdash, the Afikoman was
the Paschal lamb itself.
Yes,
you weren't allowed to eat matzah with it. Okay? You weren't even allowed to eat matzah with it. You're not allowed to eat anything with it. We eat
together as a wrap, matzah, moria.
That was in the middle. That's Hillel. That's Hillel. That's the sandwich. Yeah. But that's another thing. In any case, so Rabbi Akiva, he certainly doesn't hold this way. It's almost 100% that he doesn't. Maybe one opinion says that he does, and so for him, you ate the matzah in the beginning. You were finished with the mitzvah. You did the mitzvah. It's not the afikomen.
Did they make brachas on Farpas and people that...
That's part of that's part of it.
So
part of
only Rabbi Akiva?
No,
or
but
others?
No. All that is before.
Oh, it's before...
No, you're right. It's right after the matzah. You're right.
The hard-boiled egg.
Right, but you have to because that's the whole idea that you have to eat the matzah with the maror and with the... So it's part of it.
The hard-boiled egg come in?
That's instead of chagiga. It's not it's instead of
what?
every Pesach everybody would the one chag that everybody was in Yerushalayim, they had to be in Yerushalayim. Basically, was Pesach. Theoretically, they had to come for Sukkot and Shavuos also, but that didn't always happen. The one chag that everybody came was Pesach, and every time that you come up for a chag to Yerushalayim, you're supposed to bring a korban chagiga, which is another korban by itself. So we bring an egg because it's like something from Fleischig, but it's not because there's also all kinds of remazim. Anyway, so what do we have here? We have the two main disputants of how to do the Seder, and they're sitting together in the same house, and they're having Seder together, and what do? Who did they do according to Rabbi Elazar? So you would have thought that maybe it would have been a machlokus. But no, you see there, what does Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah do? He does exactly what his host. How do I know he's his host? Because Rabbi Akiva was the Rav of Bnei Brak. That was his city. But it's not Stam. Why did I start from here? Because, so first of all, we learned this, that if you go to, any time that you go, there's even a parak, the chapter in Shas, and the whole Gemara that deals with questions of minhag. What do you do when you go to somebody else's house, to a different place? What is it considered? When are you considered to be a member of a different community? This whole topic is in Pesachim for some reason. It's the fourth parak of Pesachim, Makom Shenagu, or third parak, I don't know, it's the third or fourth. Makom Shenagu, and that deals with all those questions. And it's almost like that the center point, if you take this as a center point of the Haggadah, it's like that they are halacha lemaisa, they're doing what the Gemara says, that if you go to somebody else's house, you do like they do. So I'm not telling you what to do, I'm just telling you how it looks like in the Haggadah. But the amazing thing is that, and this is where I think it's all going. Who was Rabbi Akiva? He was the son of converts. Specifically who? Okay, which part of Esav?
Which part? I just spoke about it.
Who specifically was his great granddaddy? Okay. It's from Haman.
Rabbi Akiva himself was from Haman?
So always we don't say it, but it's come out in the last few years. Everybody says it already. So
Are those
say
the
it.
grandchildren of Haman that are learning
Good.
the
Ibn
name?
Emra, that's him.
That's Rabbi Akiva.
Good.
I know that. I'll tell you a very, very quick joke. It's a two-line joke. So can you imagine the Rebbe's for bringing, and it's getting to be done, and students will interrupt and say, "Oh wait, we have to stop the bringing. It's time to say Shema." How could such a travesty happen? It was in B'nai B'rah.
Where the Rebbe doesn't bring. Anyway,
Because, why doesn't it?
nah, it's a joke. I guess he had to be there. Anyway.
That's why Yaakov is afraid to kill Esau. That all those descendants.
So who's Rabbi Akiva? Rabbi Akiva is Torah Sheba'al Peh. He's the entire oral Torah. The oral Torah that we have, there were two traditions in his time: Rabbi Yishmael and his tradition, Rabbi Akiva. And unfortunately, Rabbi Yishmael's students were all killed in by the Romans, and it didn't survive. We know what they said because Rabbi Akiva also knew what they said, and he passed it on, and there were probably minor students that it went through. But the main students that he had, they didn't survive the Roman occupation, call it. And Rabbi Akiva's students, almost all of them also died. But then he was somech. He appointed 5 new students after all the others were killed. And the 5 of them are the pillars of all of Torah Sheba'al Peh. That's how it turned out. So it wasn't because we preferred tradition to the other, more because that's how Hashem wanted it. And it became the Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda and Rashbi. They are the pillars of Torah Sheba'al Peh. The Mishnah is Rabbi Meir, the Zohar is Rashbi, and so on. So you have to know this. This all came from Haman. So this is a crazy, crazy thing. So why do we say this? Because I wouldn't say it unless a few months ago Rav Ginsburg talked about it, that as time goes on, as history unfolds, you begin to see that even the forces that most opposed Yiddishkeit and opposed the Torah, in the end, not only do they make peace, but in some way they're incorporated into Torah. And it's a very big thing. I have to say this even though I didn't want to say it, but I'll say it anyway. Somebody asked him after the class, so what do you do with he mentioned a certain name, which you can all guess. And I think it was even in the questions, even at the questions after the class, somebody asked him about a particular name. What about this person? So he said it's too soon. You can't. There's a concept called meito mutalifanav, that a person's dead is still in front of him. So you can't. You don't make amends to somebody when you're still mourning. But over time, over hundreds and thousands of years, it turns out that what was so demonic and so, the worst type of anti-Torah in Judaism becomes an integral part of who we are. So the first part that we're going to talk about is what did Amalek give us? It's a strange thing, but that's really the question. So usually we all know that the Baal Shem Tov says Amalek is equal to Safek, that is equal to doubt. But there's a very interesting thing that the sages say, doubt. So is doubt a good thing or a bad thing? Well, it depends. It depends what you're doubting. The normal Jewish viewpoint is somehow that you're not supposed to doubt anything. But the sages have this very interesting saying. It says, "En simcha ka'atarat asfekot," which means there's no joy like, the usual translation is unraveling doubts, meaning sort of like answering the doubt. But that's not what it literally means in Hebrew. It can also mean, hatara is also to make something mutter, to make it permissible. So there's no joy like making doubt permissible. That's what it comes out to. So which doubts? So if you're in Torah Nefesh, everybody already knows that the biggest doubt that we have is I have to doubt my ego. I don't believe it. every story it tells me about other people that they think this and they want this from me and they're thinking negative things about me or they're thinking good things about me. All these things, I don't believe him. And the ego keeps telling me stories, and also I might not even believe myself. That's what Chazal say. Al tamin b'atzmacha ad yom motcha. You can't trust yourself. You have to doubt yourself in a certain sense. Lest you begin to you begin to be what we call when somebody is not vigilant. So you become what's the word? You become like you don't think about things. You become passive. That's not the word I'm looking for. Careless in who you in careless in developing yourself. You have to continually doubt. You have to say, no, is this really what Hashem wants from me? Is this it? Is this the end of it? Continue to always complacent. Thank you. Become complacent. Okay. So the truth is that Amalek gives us that ability. So, for instance, maybe there's nobody like Rabbi Akiva maybe there's no other example like a person like that, who until age 40 was one thing, and suddenly he doubted himself. And who put the doubt into him? His wife. Maybe a drop of water, same thing. His wife told him. She saw that here's a very wealthy woman who has everything she wants, and suddenly she wants this shepherd who has nothing and doesn't know anything, is completely uneducated, can't even read and write. So that's tremendous doubt. But it's doubt in the sense that it put doubt in him in the positive sense, right? Because she really believed in him rather than doubted in him. So there's a very interesting gematria that if we just take the first, how do we get to Amalek? So Amalek is the 5th generation from Avram, right? So Avram, Yitzchak, and then instead of Yaakov, goes through Esav. Esav has a son called Elipaz, and Elipaz's son is Amalek. So the interesting thing is, if you add all the names together, Avram, Yitzchak, Esav, Elipaz, Amalek, you add them all together, you get 5 times doubt. So there's 5 doubts that, again, it's connected to the 5 fingers. There's 5 doubts that are existential in life.
You said that the Arian said that
Okay.
at the end,
Okay.
5 questions.
Okay. So we left it like that because I didn't know what the questions were.
Okay. Good.
Will you repeat the 5?
So Avram, Yitzchak, Esav, Elipaz, and Amalek.
Father
The
of
son
Amalek.
of his son. One of his sons.
Okay. We're
His son.
going to this class. Okay, good. What
So-
the Rav taught on Purim.
Sorry?
Why would we have added his name?
Whose name?
Malek's son.
No,
No,
just to
Elipaz.
Amalek. These are
Elipaz.
A grandson of his.
Elipaz.
again, Amalek is Esav's grandson. So his father is Elipaz.
Okay.
Who is,
That's okay.
There's a book named after him on the south.
Amalek or Elipaz?
Elipaz.
Really?
And Timnah, there's another one too.
Okay, and Timnah. And if I'm not mistaken, they're conservative, or at least some of them are. And they've become the bastions of solar energy now. That's their big thing. Okay.
Are you going to
5
this?
questions.
Yes. So let's see what they are.
That's what the class is.
So, really, the idea here is that each generation from Avram to Esav was faced with an existential doubt. And they're supposed to solve it in some way, in one direction or another. But what it's saying is that you can't really run away from these 5. It's like they're ingrained. And it's part of what it means to be a Jew, that you have to answer these. So you can take Avram's answer, you can take Yitzchak's answer. But from then on, from Esav and Elipaz and Amalek, it's a lot of work. Maybe Avram Yitzchak we can count on. But after that, the doubts need to be answered anew all the time. So the first doubt that Avram had was whether the world was created or not. There's two options: either it was created or it wasn't created. What do we mean? The question whether the world was created or not can be stated as, is the world eternal or not? And it's not necessarily the same question as, is there a Shem? Because a lot of the Greeks believed that there was a God that was running things, but the world is eternal. Plato's like that. Aristotle tends to that. He's not 100% sure. Even the Rambam says, I have no proofs to show you 100% that the world is created.
No?
Voracious bara, Elohim.
So he says that verse is a little bit of like something in my side, but I don't have proof, meaning
Like
I don't have like a logical proof that says the same thing. Since the Torah says, okay, I believe. But the Rambam wanted to base everything on logic. And he didn't have a good logical argument to show that. So he said in the end, of all the different options, he's not sure which one is right. But the Torah says, but he says, if I ever find a logical argument that will prove that the world is eternal, I'll have to reinterpret what it says in Bereshis.
Eternal here means more without a beginning.
Right, without a beginning. Right, without a beginning. But we know that that's the suffix that Avram solved. Right, what was Avram's solution to this? It's even in his name. It says, Bereshit bara Elokim ta shamayim v'ta haaretz, and then it says again, Ele toldot ha-shamayim v'haaretz behi bar'am, al tikra behi bar'am, la be'avram. That the world was created with Avram. Meaning the whole creation, even you hear it in his name, right? Avraham, the first three letters are bara. So Avram is very linked to belief in the world being created. But it's not just that. It's like the Baal Shem Tov explained that Avram's conception of the world being created is not just that it was created once, but rather that it's being recreated at every single moment. And that is the source for Avram's loving kindness. It's a very deep idea that you can't do real loving kindness
Unless you forget the past.
okay, unless you believe that the world was just created and that whatever I do at this moment is good for this moment. That's it. And it's not going to be, next moment might be completely different. That's called Olam Chesed Yibaneh, that the world is built out of loving kindness, out of Avraham. Like the Baal Shem Tov explains, that it's at every single moment the world is being recreated. What does that also mean? It also means that when we look at the state of reality now, we might come to a feeling of Yush, of despair, because how can we get from where we are to something new, to a better situation, and so on? It says you have no reason to despair because the world is being recreated at every moment. You don't know what it will be like the next moment. Really, Hashem wants to recreate it with loving kindness. He wants it all to be loving kindness. But it all depends on my actions now. It's how I see it. And this goes into a lot of depth into what we learned as faith and confidence, that in the end, it's how you see reality. That how you see reality is how reality will in the end be. Because you're not really creating it, you're bringing out what Hashem intended there to be here anyway. Except that so far people have been looking with a negative eye, with the Ayn Ra. When you begin to look with an Ayn Tovah, so reality wants to answer you by showing what it's really like. That really it's Olam Chesed, it was built with loving kindness. It's just waiting for the right person or the right attitude or the right zeitgeist or call it whatever to bring that loving kindness out. So that Avram solved. That was the question. The next thing is Yitzchak. Yitzchak was faced with another question. He said the world was created. Now there's an existential question of whether or not there's hashgacha, whether or not there's divine providence. What does divine providence mean? Divine providence means that after the fact, this is what Hashem wanted. That's divine providence. Divine providence doesn't mean that before the fact this is what Hashem wants. That's a big, because we just said that it all depends on you. But after the fact, what the world will be like the next moment is up to us. But after the fact, now that it's how it is, this moment, that's divine providence. We learned this in length, that it's called living with the sibot, with the causes, right? Living with the circumstances. Circumstances are round, right? Because they circumspect you, your surroundings, your environment. Most of what we learn about the ego is about accepting the circumstances. See them as divine providence, that Hashem never left me. No, it's the opposite of free will. It's that I don't have free will. Now, my only free will is to accept that this is by divine providence. But it's one of the deepest things, to understand that, at least at the level of my animal soul, the most that I can get to it in the beginning is an acceptance of the circumstances. It's after the fact that this is how Hashem wants it. That's called living with the circumstance, living with the causes, with the sibut.
It's like surrender.
It's like surrendering. Sachna. The most that the ego can get to is a sense of achna, of submission, of surrender. So it surrenders to Hashem's providence, that this is how Hashem wants it. And doesn't rebel against it. To rebel against it means that, okay, if this is how you want it, so I'm not playing. So I'm against you. Or to say, there's no Hashem, because how could it be that Hashem would let this or that happen? But hachna in the nefesh, submission, is to understand, to accept that this is how divine providence wanted it. So why do we say that this is Yitzchak? Because Yitzchak had a very concrete will that he eventually surrendered. What was his concrete will? Yeah, but what's his gvura? What's the thing he was mamish moiser nefesh on? Something that he wanted more than anything.
Giving the bracha to Esav.
Exactly. He wanted to give the blessings to Esav. He thought Esav was the right son to invest in. And he would do tshuva. He would give him the blessing. Everything you have to understand, everything in Yitzchak's mind is revolving around the idea that Yaakov's going to be okay anyway. But the one I want to invest in, and the one that I believe that if I invest in him, it's like a lot of people have that. I remember when I was younger, the youngest sister above me is 10 years away. So in one of my birthdays, I remember that my whole class came over, and she's always been a criminologist in her head. So who did she connect to? To the worst kid in the class. I'm like, why are you investing all your time in him? But that's how the criminologist works. He sees who's the worst one, and this one, if I believe in him, he's gonna top everybody. I don't know where this idea comes from, but it's from Yitzchak. I don't connect to it, but Zeno, it's how he thought. So he did everything he could to give Esav the blessings, and what can he do? He tricked him. So what could he have done? He could have said, "You can't trick me. Everything I gave to Yaakov, I'm taking away, and I'm giving it to Esav." But no, he saw that if Hashgacha wanted it this way, so he surrenders to it. He says, it's not just that they tricked me. This is how Hashem wants it. Hashem is with Yaakov. This is who he's with. And so he says, V'gam baruch yeh. and he will also be blessed. Meaning he's blessed, regardless of what happened, regardless of how he did it. It's always, when you look at the circumstances, you're never satisfied with how they came about. They always seem to be accidental or mechanized or whatever they are, but they're not the way it should have been. But Yitzchak has this ability to say, no, this is Ba'eshgacha. In that sense, he... When he heard Esav, because he thought Esav was going to kill him. Usually that's how it's explained. Maybe there's something else.
It's not like switching.
And also the feeling that to also take the circumstances in stride and not even fret for a moment, that's almost unheard of. So obviously he was off balance when he realized that this had happened to his very important plan of how to save the world. And really what happened, when you think about it, what happened from all this? Esav was going to, at least according to how Yitzchak saw it, Esav was going to bring the Mashiach in that generation. It's Yaakov who's not ready. He says, when they finally meet up, he says, you go ahead, because you're very quick. You go ahead, and I have to go slowly because of my children, meaning I have all this building to do. When I'm done, I'll see you in 3,000 years. We'll talk about it then. But and we're still waiting for Yaakov to finish. No? So what do you want to finish? Rabbi already said, no, it's already, we finished building all the kelim to hold Esav's lights.
So Esav question. Now we're up to Esav. Whoa.
So what's Esav's problem? What's the suffix that he's that he didn't solve correctly? It remains a suffix for him. He doesn't know what to do with it. The question is whether Hashem chooses something or not. Whether there's what we call bechira, but the bechira here is not my bechira. It's not my free will. Rather, whether Hashem has hierarchy in the world. Is there?
You're still talking about the second doubt?
No, third. No, the third one. The one thing that is very difficult for the nations of the world to accept, and today the modern intelligence, is that in spite of the fact that Hashem is infinite, and theoretically everything should be equal for Him, okay, what should it matter to Hashem whether you put 8 strings in your tzitzis or you put 9? What should matter if you even put tzitzis on? Who cares? What should it matter, like the sages say, whether you shach the animal from the neck or from the back? What's the difference? It's a very hard thing to explain, because if you just assume Hashem is just infinite, He's just transcendent, as it's called, then there's no reason for one thing to be better than another.
It's for us.
So even for you, so you have this thing, fine, but why would you say that it's a choice? It could, if it's for you, it's just like a drill sergeant. It doesn't matter if we do the push-ups first or we do the whatever.
For your good.
We have to do all of them. So, okay, but he doesn't care. Like, okay. But this notion that apart from Hashem's transcendence, there's also Hashem's immanence. Immanence means that He also is in reality, not just above reality. That is the existential doubt that Esav wasn't able to solve ever. And for him everything is equal. And because of that, it says, Be'alacha, Esav soneh Yaakov. Esav hates Yaakov because Yaakov represents a different type of thinking called that Hashem is also immanent. He's not just transcendent, and it's a lot of times we explain it in His name itself. The Yud becomes the Yaakov. Yaakov is that the Yud, the first letter of Yaakov, goes all the way down to the Yaakov, all the way down to the heel. So what are we saying? That there's like what was highest came down to the lowest place.
But what do you answer to the people who ask that question? Why does Hashem
So,
care?
Hashem cares because I'm not talking about his transcendent part. You're right, in his transcendent part, he doesn't care. But when he comes down, it's called the kav.
Yes.
It comes down into reality, it's already a hierarchy. In a kav, in a line, there's top and there's bottom. In a circle, that's how we picture transcendence as like being circular, because really there's no top or bottom. There's no one location on the circle that's closer to the center. They're all equally distant. That's the definition of a circle. But for there to be a line also, and the line has a top and a bottom, so that Esav can't chap. He's not willing to accept that.
Doesn't make sense.
Didn't answer the question.
Well,
Doesn't
No,
make
if somebody asked, what difference does it make? 5 strings, 8 strings.
Ken, as long as you're talking about transcendence, you're right, it doesn't matter. But the moment that Hashem makes his will known, so of course it matters. That's his will. He wants this and he doesn't want that.
That's what Hashem wants, and we don't ask
Ken,
questions.
it's not that we don't ask questions. There's also reasons there, and you can explain if you want why 8 is better than 7. We have all kinds of things that come out of it. But we begin from the fact that he revealed his will, which is different, which is a completely different Hashem, if you want, or revealing a completely different side of himself than if we're just saying that he's a creator and everything is equal before him.
Sounds like an Eastern religion.
Everything is equal. Yeah. Of course, they have it right as long as you're talking about transcendence. So Esav has this whole sugya, what to do with this. But Yaakov, he represents that Hashem does have something in particular that he wants and not something else. And that's exactly why at that moment the lineage of Amalek deviates from the Jewish people. It becomes that Amalek, for him, everything is equal. By the way, we talked about this at least once or twice. From, if you remember, the Judith Friedman brought to our attention her husband's great uncle, who was Michael Forschlager, who was probably the most instrumental person to build Yiddishkeit in America. He passed away in the early 50s. And he lived in Baltimore. They tried to get him to live in New York. He didn't want to because he said, if I live in New York, everybody's going to ask me questions all the time and not going to have time to learn. So he went down to Baltimore.
This is in the 50s or 40s?
He passed away in the 50s.
So this is probably the 30s? No.
Yeah, he arrived sometime after World War I.
Okay.
And he was a Talmud of the Sochachover, of the Abnei Nezer. And he was you have to see his chidushim. It's like unreal. And the amazing thing about it is how the nigla and the nistar, the pnimius and the halacha, for him are like just one thing, fused completely. The Rebbe always talked about that they shouldn't be separate. For him, it's one thing, mamish one thing. It's like he jumps from Arizal to Shulchan Aruch. Like for him, it's just how he sees the world. Anyway, so he was. It's not known to a lot of people, but Ner Yisrael was his creation. But another thing that was his creation wasn't his creation because it was brought from Europe, but he put the first Rosh Yeshiva there, and he made it happen. It was Telz Yeshiva. And all these yeshivas weren't necessarily Hasidish, even though he was very Hasidish. He wore shtreimel on Shabbos.
What was his name?
Forschlager.
And Telz was in Baltimore also?
Telz is in Cleveland. And
Very late fish.
it's very Litvish, and the Rosh Yeshiva was a closet Lubavitcher. There's people,
In
lots of
Telz?
them. Yeah.
Which one?
With the G, you can't remember, Gifter. He had Ner Yisrael, he wasn't a Lubavitcher at all, wasn't even Hasidish, but he was his student. He had learned with him for years. I can't remember, it starts with a B. I never remember names. Anyway, he has a beautiful, beautiful thing on Purim. And he just analyzes all kinds of things. One of the things he comes up with is that by Amalek, men and women were entirely equal.
Oh.
There was absolutely no difference between men and women. Women fought like men. Everything was equal, completely equal. It was a completely egalitarian society. So that, in and of itself, is a very big teaching.
Which Amalek is the grandson or the son of Eliphaz? When we say specifically.
Amalek that we meet in the time of Shaul and David. From the psukim there, he learns, he shows it, that there was no difference. It's like, if you wanted, if there was anything that was sort of like this, it's like the Vikings. Maybe the closest thing to them. Where there was, women fought alongside men, it was completely equal. There was no... in the Shmuel. Yeah. So that's a very transcendental picture of reality, where everything should be equal. There's no reason to build a hierarchy even. It also explains a lot of things why, Chazal go to a lot of pains to tell us how Haman could have been the descendant of Agag who was killed by Shmuel. So how could he? So all kinds of. In the end, the medrash is to rectify your imagination. Doesn't necessarily mean that this is how it happened. But there's a lot to be said for the fact that that Haman was just a guy. He wasn't a Maleki. He wasn't anything. It's just that by his philosophy, by what he practiced and how he was, from that we recognize that this is a type of philosophy that exists in the world. And really what it is this, again, that Hashem is only transcendental. And if you want, that's also with the Germans, same thing. This whole idea that somehow there's nothing chosen in the world. Everything should be equal. And when you do that, you become very, what we call today, pantheistic. Everything is godly. And the one thing that bothers you in that picture is that suddenly there's a nation that comes and says, well, I'm more godly than you. That's how you hear it. But you can't exercise the idea that there's also a hierarchy, there's also a line that comes into reality, and it defines top and bottom.
Nobody likes it when we say we are different.
No, nobody likes it.
That's why just quietly.
I don't know.
Just be different.
Just be it.
This is still connected with the third doubt.
So this is the third doubt. For
Now the
Yaakov,
fourth one.
Yaakov is the epitome of from now on there's a new nation. There's a new thing. And if you want, he's the middle axis, right? Yaakov is Tiferet. Normally when we say there's a Kav, what we really mean to say is there's Torah. Torah is Yaakov, it's the middle axis. And the middle axis is the one that's really aligned. It goes from all the way up top, all the way to the bottom. So he's the epitome of that. Elipaz, he has another doubt.
That's number 4.
Okay, this is the fourth one. Is there reward and punishment? Does Hashem actually judge the world? How do we know it's like this? Because he shows up in one of the books of the Tanakh, in Eov. So there's a tradition that Elipaz Teimani, in Eov, in Job, he's also Elipaz, the son of Esav. He's the same person. No, the Elipaz Teimani, one of the 3 companions of Eov that come to console him. So he's Esav's son. They're the only 2 Elipazes in the Tanakh. So it's very interesting. What does Elipaz say? So Job says maybe there's no reward and punishment. Because what's his complaint? I did everything right, and now Hashem is punishing me. So how can this is like the question of Job, is how can bad things happen to good people? Why is this? So there must be no real accounting here. So what's Eliphaz's answer? What is the answer?
Maybe you did say.
Okay.
And you didn't.
He says you don't know. What are you not aware of? You must have done something wrong. Okay, so now that's the question of it. You have to doubt this. Here you mamish have to instill doubt in this whole story.
Instill doubt about whether you did something wrong.
No.
Instill doubt.
That is your
Job
fault.
says, Job says, I didn't do anything wrong. Hashem is just punishing me for no reason, which means there's no reward in punishment. Comes Eliphaz and says, you must have done something wrong. And if you would have known what you did wrong, you would see that the way you're being punished is exactly the right type of retribution for what you did.
So that's reinforcing the concept of.
So it seems that he does believe in reward and punishment, except that that's not reward and punishment. That when it comes to reward and punishment, this is really where you have to work on it. You have to accept that there's such a thing that you can doubt reward and punishment, not in the sense whether there is or isn't, but rather in the sense of whether I understand it or not. Eliphaz, he's so convinced that there's reward and punishment that he says you're guilty. So somebody comes into you for advice, right? And he says this and this happened to me. So what should you think? So what should you think? That what? Hashem's punishing you.
But they say that's
What kind of an advisor are you going to be if that's what you think? So you have to right away. You have to doubt. What am I doubting? Not whether there is reward or punishment, rather whether I can understand it. I have to always doubt that. I don't understand fully. That's the answer that in the end, Elihu ben Brachel, the fourth person in the story, so he comes to Job and he says, how can you understand Hashem's reward and punishment? You don't know how it works. He's like Elihu ben Brachel equals Mashiach.
Elihu ben Bracha.
Yeah, he's the fourth. He's not a companion. He was sitting there apparently just to be Menachem Eov. He's not one of his friends. And he hears the three friends constantly telling Eov why he's to blame for everything. And finally he opens his mouth and he says, I was waiting for wisdom to speak. I was waiting for years for the wise men who are older than me to say something that makes some sense, but they didn't say anything. So I have to say to you, Eov, how do you know that you understand Hashem's reward and punishment? So there the doubt has to continue to exist, always. On the one hand, my answer is, of course there's reward and punishment, there's no doubt. But the doubt lingers in the sense that I can't completely fathom it. I can't really tell you how it works. One of the most beautiful pieces I've seen, and this is like it was an expansion of something the Rebbe used to say a lot. It was written by Aaron Moss in Australia. So he said, why should we not be complacent or accepting of another person's suffering? Obviously, Magielo. He deserves it. There's reward and punishment. Right? Why should you care? Hashem gave him what he deserves. It's a kapara, it's this, it's that. So the Rebbe used to say it very simply, and he opened it up a little. The Rebbe used to say that when it hurts, you have to cry. And then he turned it into something very interesting. He said, that is your ability to identify and to empathize with another person's pain. That is what makes you human. And to do that, you have to doubt that you understand reward and punishment. If you just say, that's it, it's just a punishment, for, you should be happy, this is what you're getting. You can't imagine you say that to somebody. That's not what Hashem wants from us. On the contrary, He wants us to doubt whether we can understand it. So why is it there? For me to exercise my humanity, which means to feel somebody else.
Can I ask you,
Yeah,
what,
sure.
if the ability to empathize with another's pain makes you... Well, if you can't...
It's Freud knocking on the door.
If you can't, are you an animal? Are you subhuman? What are you?
You're like a lipaz. You're in Amalek the wrong way. Like that you don't understand that you're supposed to doubt this. Meaning that I don't know whether this is just a punishment. I don't know how Hashem runs the world really.
And to say kapara is not good?
Seta, if it's for yourself, you can say that.
Yes.
But you can't say that for somebody else.
Last week someone was a co-ed. Anyway, he was going to join it. He was in the car with his 9-year-old son. And he got out of the car, and a woman just hit him, and he died. And his son watched this guy get killed, and he left a wife and 4 kids.
It's a coercion. That is a...
I just like my daughter knows him very well. She was totally broken. And what do? You just say, I don't understand anything, It's like,
That's right.
that's all you can say.
And because you can say that, so you can also go to be menachem. You can also be with the person. Here it's, what about that? What did they do? I don't know. But like if a person's ill, that's the main thing, the main example. So if they're ill, you go to be with them. You go to help them. You can only do that if you can doubt the fact that you understand how this works. If you have a good answer, and one of the things that Baal Shem Tov didn't like, exactly for this reason, was Gilgulim. He didn't like people explaining things based on Gilgul. He says, because if you do that, you're back into into his frame of mind, which is there's a reason for this. There's a reason for it. No, I'm putter from taking care of it. But exactly the reason why Hashem doesn't want us to understand this is so that we become involved, both emotionally and in other ways. And that's what it means to be a human being. That's what it means to care for somebody.
And to say that Hashem goes through Velkot Shoshanim is not an answer?
Have you ever seen a parent that Chas v'Shalom, that happens to them and now they're consoled? Oh yeah, now it makes sense. No, it doesn't happen.
Okay, 5.
So the 5th one, and this again is the same thing, again, whether there's a purpose for it all. This is what Amalek wants. Amalek's big deal is that there's no purpose. Is it good to have this suffix or not? So here, like a lipaz, you have to have this suffix. What do you mean? What do we mean you have to have this suffix? There's a story from Reb Nachman called the Chacham and the Tam, the wise man and the simpleton, or the sincere person, and which could be translated into Oscar Wilde's "The Importance of Being Earnest," because earnest also means to be a tam. A tam is somebody who's earnest, and thanks to his earnestness, he has a wonderful life, even though he's like an idiot. That's what it looks like. Why does the wise man fall in Reb Nachman's story? Because he's always looking for the tachlis, for the purpose behind things. He's always searching for it. So he says, what's the purpose of getting a job? It's to make money, right? So why should I take a job that I enjoy? I should take the job that gives me the most money. And so he does that. But then he realizes, why do I need money? It's for something else. And he keeps going. He never does anything in the end. He's always second-guessing himself, always like worried about what's the purpose in the end. Unfortunately, the purpose changes. When you're young, the purpose is one thing. When you're older, the purpose is another thing. I heard the story from somebody told a story last night, a place I was, about the Rebbe, about a man who was 80 years old, and he said that when he was 50, he went to see the Rebbe, and he was in really deep depression, and he couldn't do anything. And the Rebbe saw that he was a famous person. Actually, he was in the United States government in some way, and the Rebbe recognized him.
Jewish?
He's a Jew, and first he didn't want to go because he sent word to 770 that he was coming, and they said, "We're sorry, the Rebbe hasn't seen people in a private audience for years already, but you can come on Sundays." So he said, if the Rebbe doesn't want to see me, I don't want to see him. But his wife forced him in the end to go. And he went and he waited and he came to the Rebbe in dollars. And the Rebbe gave him $1 and said, "Bracha v'atzacha." The Rebbe was very astute, so he sees that, okay, so here's another $1, Bracha v'atzacha. He's not moving. See, because he's like, this is it? I did all this and all I get is a bracha v'atzacha. So the Rebbe saw that. The Rebbe asked him, "So what's troubling you?" So he wouldn't answer. So he said that the Rebbe took him aside because he was very sensitive, and he saw that he's a well-known person. He doesn't want to be recorded in front of the videos. So he took him aside where he couldn't be heard. So the story you can't see, I guess you can't see it on the videos. And he told him, "I'm in deep depression and I don't know what to do." So the Rebbe asked him a question. He says, "How do you think that, who was the greatest Jewish leader ever?" So he didn't know. Obviously, he wasn't. He says, "Moshe Rabbeinu." So how old was Moshe Rabbeinu when he became the leader of the Jewish people? So also he didn't know. He tells him he's 80. He says to him, "How do you think an 80-year-old man can decide to take on this very, very complex and bewildered people and lead them? How do you think he thought he was going to do this? Where did he get the strength to do this from?" So he says, "I'll tell you the secret. The secret is, for Moshe, it didn't matter at all what he had done until today. The only thing that mattered for him was what was he going to do from here on out. Meaning everything he had done or not done until now was irrelevant. And now he's starting again. Today is a new day. This is something new completely." So he said that when he was... So this man who said the story said he went to see him, and it was his 80th birthday, and he said, "Today I'm starting a new career." He took it to heart. He came out of the depression. Then he said, at age 80, what the Rebbe was telling me was that I have to start something completely new. I have to start completely... So he said that day that he came to visit him on his birthday, he started a new company. He went off to teach Chinese. I don't know, something ridiculous like that. And, okay, that's the question of purpose. What's the purpose? You have to doubt the purpose also. Who says that I know my purpose? My purpose until now was ABC. Okay, settled. Simcha katarat sfekot, to allow the doubt to be permissible, is to allow myself to doubt whether this has been my purpose all along. It's not a negative thing. It's a positive thing if I'm looking forward. If it's just a question of whether it was all worth it, then it's not. That's not the doubt that's permissible. The permissible doubt is to say, I doubt that I know what my purpose is. I have a lot more than I can even dream of right now.
I have a lot more to do.
I have a lot more purpose. My mission in life is much greater than everything that I've seen until now. And I can only do that if I ignore the past. So whatever was. That's it. So that's a Malik's. So these are 5 existential doubts. Did Hashem create the world? Is there divine providence? Is there hierarchy? Is there a choice? Meaning, does Hashem want something, one thing or another? is there reward and punishment, and is there a purpose? And so when you contend with these all the time, that's what it means to fix a malik. That means to... So clearly Rabbi Akiva was like that, because at age 40, he didn't do it at age 80, but at age 40, he suddenly took a complete turn in his life and said, no, my purpose is not to be a shepherd.
But what did you say? To contend with all
And I'm
this
not
is
being
to
punished.
Fix a mullet, to fix what?
It's to incorporate a malik into us in a positive way. So what time is it? What is the time?
We're too busy writing.
10 after 1.
10 after 1. So we have a few more minutes. Okay. So from here we
so
come...
that's the point, is to contend with all this, is to incorporate a malach in us?
Yeah,
in a
to
positive- that's
take
the point
these
of all
take
this.
these doubts the right way.
But these are not the doubts from the
The Re's doubts are very technical. It's how many pieces of man, how many pieces of ban went into each piece of Atik and Arich. It's very, very technical. And it's mathematical, really. He's like he paints a mathematical picture. It's not even...
So are you saying that to do that has to do with Rabbi Akiva, has to do with
Okay.
Pesach?
Right. And that's like, again, to come out, what is imagine that you would be in Mitzrayim, and now Moshe Rabbeinu comes along, and he says, we're going on a trip to this mountain I visited a few months ago. We're going to get the Torah there, and from there we're going to go to Eretz Yisrael, and this is it.
They didn't want it.
4/5 of the people
They stayed there.
said, no, this is our purpose in life.
To stay in Egypt.
This is the world that we know. I mean, think about it. The world that Mashiach is going to bring in is not the world...
We'll say we want to stay.
People will say, what, am I nuts? I'm not going there. I have to doubt this existence at a lot of levels in order to be willing to go to the next level, to enter into a new reality. Okay, well, let's do something more. So we get to do a little bit more than this. There's on the 8th day of Pesach in Chutz La'aretz, we do it on the 7th day. So the Baal Shem Tov he initiated a new holiday, if you want. It's the 7th day of Pesach. It's the 8th day. It's a holiday anyway. But he added this thing called Sudas Mashiach.
Yes.
And it's a new thing. Again, it's like people will say, my father didn't do Sudas Mashiach, why should I? What? Okay, maybe.
And this year we do too, because we have on Friday and on Shabbos.
So there's a whole question about when to do it. So most people still do it on the 7th day in Eretz Yisrael, because it's not Pesach.
Comes out
to do two?
In this Seder, to do the second one to be the
Even in
second
Eretz
day.
Yisrael?
Yes,
Yeah,
I read
to
it.
do it in the second one.
If they have Shabbos, you're not allowed to start eating like this before Shabbos.
Okay.
In order to be like on the same page as the rest of the world, also we get to do the brach.
Yeah, we do. Well, we could do Gebracht the moment that Pesach ends. We don't have to wait until the next day. Start Motzei Shabbat on end of Friday.
But as soon as Shabbos
For Shabbos we
Well,
already.
that's how it would be anyhow. It'd be the 8th.
Okay, so right.
Okay.
I haven't done enough Sdarim and enough 8th days of Pesach in Chutz La'aretz to be to have that down yet. Anyway, so there's a very interesting thing that even when it comes to Mashiach, you have to have some doubts.
Oh, yes.
What does it mean to have some doubts? So whether you understand this thing called Mashiach, the famous thing from Tzemach Tzedek after the Alter Rebbe passed away, that everybody was very depressed. So he said that they were depressed because they thought the Alter Rebbe would be the Mashiach. So the Tzemach Tzedek, his grandson, he said to the people that were sitting outside and depressed about life because the Alter Rebbe is dead, and so what are we going to do? So he said to them, the Mashiach that's going to come, nobody wants. And the Mashiach that everybody wants is never going to come. Okay? Because the Mashiach is not what you think it is. Okay. There's a really surprising statement in the Talmud, in Sanhedrin. And there's a person named Rabbi Hillel, who is somebody from the Talmud age. He's not from the Mishnah. He's certainly not Hillel Hazakin, the elder, who was in the time of the temple. There's also a Hillel. There's another Hillel who we owe our calendar to. He was the one who established the calendar. He calculated it. So he's not that person either. He's somebody that shows up very little. He's maybe in 2 places in the whole Shas.
Which Shas you quoted?
In Sanhedrin, it's, if I'm not mistaken, it's Tzadik
This is now
Zayin.
in Sanhedrin.
And there he says, Rabbi Hillel says, En le Mashiach l'Yisrael. There's no Mashiach for the Jewish people because they already ate him in the time of Chizkiyahu. In the time, they already used them up. To eat something is like you already got what you could out of it a long time ago. So, how do you explain this thing? How can you explain something like this? So the simplest answer is that, so there's 10 different explanations show up in the different books for this. Some of them are very surprising.
You're not going to give us all care, are you?
We'll do it really quickly. We got as many as we
Just
can.
go, team. Yeah.
Is there like a little preparation for the 7th day of Pesach? So the first explanation is very simple. It says Mashiach is not going to redeem us. Who will? Hashem himself. Same way as it was in Mitzrayim. You're right. Moshe did a lot of stuff. And then, the final night, Hashem came. Ani velo hamalach, ani velo hasaraf. I myself am coming down. And he'll do it. So that's the simplest explanation. Another explanation is like the Baal Shem Tov's explanation. The Baal Shem Tov says, when it says Ein Mazal Yisrael, there's no mazel for the Jewish people, meaning we're not governed by the mazalot, by the constellations, by nature. And in the time of up till 200 years ago, the law of nature was astrology. So today we say there's other laws of nature. So it's not nature that governs us. Rather, the Baal Shem Tov reads it, Ein Mazal Yisrael. What is Ein? The nothingness is what governs the Jewish people. So it's a little close. It's similar in some ways to saying that Hashem is going to redeem us himself, but it's a little bit different. Why? Because it's saying that Ein Mashiach L'Yisrael. That's how you should read it. That the Ein is the Mashiach. Meaning, in other words, who reveals the Ein? Who reveals the nothingness? Each one of us inside. When we all reveal this ability to be batal, to be self-nullified before Hashem, that's the Ein, then that's the Mashiach. And it's like a zeitgeist. It's something that's in the entire people together. It's a spirit that dwells in everybody. The next one is that Ein Mashiach L'Yisrael is not talking about that there's no Mashiach, rather that he's not for Israel. He's not for the Jewish people. It's for the nations of the world. And this same thing appears in the Medrash.
The other nations or all of us in the nation?
All the other nations, they need Mashiach. We don't need Mashiach.
And they have to acknowledge it.
And they have to. It's for him, for them. What does he come to do? That he comes to teach them Torah. That's what he comes to do. We already have Torah. Not only do we have Torah, but it's even more than that. That sin. That's why it says Shekvar Chalu B'mei Chizkiyahu, that we ate him in the time of Chizkiyahu, because that was the beginning. Chizkiyahu and his Beis Din is considered the beginning of Torah Sheba'al Peh. Meaning that when do you really receive Torah? When does Torah really become yours? When you come and you say, this is my This is my constitution. And from here on out, I'm the Supreme Court that interprets it. Meaning I take this as face value, this is what Hashem wants, and now it's up to me to live according to this. Until you're willing to, it's almost the opposite from what some people think today. A lot of people have this picture that somehow Torah is something frozen in time. And somehow it was given 3,300 years ago, and it's frozen. But it was frozen until the moment that we started investing ourselves in interpreting it. There are rules for how to interpret it. You can't do anything you want. But the whole point that you say, I'm willing to invest myself in interpreting it, that's the moment that you become one with it. That you say, this is what's going to govern my life. Because life has different times to it, ups and downs, or whatever. If the Torah is going to be your rule book, okay, you have to know when to apply different things. You have to know how to apply them and so on. But you say in the end, I take it all from the Torah. Okay, we don't have time for many more of them. So let's just do one. Let's just do one more, which is mamish relevant for today. That what did Mashiach? What does Mashiach represent? It's supposed to represent that the suffering of the Golus is over. That's what it means, right? That all the suffering is over. What happens if the suffering of the Golus is over before the Mashiach comes? So you don't need Mashiach. How can you think about this? So you gave a very interesting way of thinking about it, that 50 years ago even, here in Israel, 50 years ago, not 50, 60 years ago, there was something called the tzena. Tzena means there were rations for everything. For butter, for eggs, for sugar, whatever you wanted. Everything was rationed. And you had these vouchers, and you came to the Makot, and you could only buy as much as your vouchers had. It was 60 years ago. We still have vouchers in my parents' house. We have they're like coupons. They're like little booklets. Jewish history. 60 years ago.
States they had, and my grandparents had vouchers back in the war.
So what is it now? The people have to clamp their stomachs because they have too much, they don't know what to do with themselves. So we complain and we complain and we complain, but the truth is that most of the suffering is gone. So not all the suffering, but so much of it is gone. Again, the 99% maybe is gone already. So when the Mashiach, for other things as well. Nachon. There's also, of course, a suffering, but it's not everywhere. It's always on the fringes now. Baruch Hashem. So he says, how big an impact will Mashiach make? So this opinion says that he's almost a prophet. The guy who wrote this, he wrote this 300 years ago. He said that when the Mashiach comes, it's not that it won't make an impact, but it'll last a second. It'll be like, okay, been there, done that. Not that impressive.
No.
Okay, the Mashiach is not the Olam Haba yet. It's not and it's very interesting that it's linked specifically to material good, not to, for instance, health. Because health, for instance, the Mashiach doesn't change health. That's the Tchiyat HaMetim. That's a different phase altogether. So when you talk about there being like a pronounced change in how we live, that's already happened. If you talk about how long we live and how well we live, that's a different question altogether. It's not related to Mashiach.
So what will the Mashiach do?
So it says that En ben olam hazeh limot HaMashiach ela shi'abud malchuyot bilvad. Whether or not we're under whether or not we can decide to govern ourselves or not.
Well, building of the temple, resurrection, all the
Again, all these are things that after the Mashiach comes.
It was Galileo.
Again, all these things after he comes. But the first thing is the physical well-being of people.
Which
And
is
he says-
which is already happening.
And he says it's happened already. So when the Mashiach comes, he'll come, and he'll do other things as well. But en Mashiach L'Yisrael means that the coming of Mashiach will be irrelevant. Nobody will care, because we already have everything that you can.
Israel has to ask all the time. They're afraid of the nations.
So,
There won't be
I don't-
death anymore, though?
What?
Will there not be death?
There will be. There will be. Even the Mashiach is supposed to die. There's sources,
Everybody gets resurrected, and then everybody's still going to
But it's
die.
after
but that's after the Mashiach. Meaning, it could be in his lifetime. The Rebbe has all kinds of explanations how it could be, but it doesn't have to be. Meaning, it could be that it's 120 years later,
Okay.
up to that distance.
So how does this all connect to Pesach?
So it's to think about when we sit down for Sudat Mashiach, that the Rebbe used to say that to bring to hasten the Mashiach, you have to learn everything that's related to Mashiach and Geula. So this is a topic that certainly nobody's really, I suspect, has not been learned anywhere. So maybe I opened a Facebook group for everybody who hears the Rebbe's classes. So I thought I would just, in the summary, just put these 10 different explanations.
In English?
Put it in English, obviously,
But you
because
haven't
it's in
written it
English.
for our class.
I haven't written it in English yet, but it's not too hard to write it up. And then, if the Rebbe said that in the end it's learning these things, so here's a topic about Mashiach and Geula that I'm certain nobody's ever learned. Definitely not in such a condensed way. That what is this Rabbi Hillel? Because it's like the contradiction. But what we're saying is that when you permit the doubt whether there's a Mashiach or isn't Mashiach, maybe that's the final straw. When you can bring yourself to that point where you can even doubt the whole thing altogether, and I can find 10 different explanations in real Talmidei Chachamim, we're talking about from the Middle Ages until today.
And what do we gain by that?
It's you learn, because it's Torah. You need to learn, so you can exercise the doubt. Here are 10 different ways to doubt whether Mashiach, like this Rabbi Hillel, whoever he is, even just to learn them and to know them during Sudas Mashiach, maybe that's the final straw. When you can actually say, Hashem, whether you bring him, you don't bring him, it's all the same to me.
What year was
Maybe
this?
he's. It's not clear 100% when he's from, but he's somewhere in the 5th century.
This is just another counterintuitive porn type thing.
That's true. The whole thing of Mashiach is from.
But it seems like that's not what the
counterintuitive.
Rebbe said.
Why?
The Rebbe was always, we want Mashiach now.
He said it, and part of it, and he said, what's the fastest way to make it happen? To learn the inyanim of Geula and Mashiach. So this is a sugya in the coming of Mashiach. That in the end, it doesn't say that you don't have to say in the end that there's no Mashiach, and not all of these say in the end that there's no Mashiach. We said the Ayin is the Mashiach. That's who the Mashiach is. We said that Hashem is the Mashiach. It's not the Mashiach. It's Hashem. We said that Mashiach comes for the nations, not for us. So there's all kinds of opinions about this. So I'm saying when you learn, it's not necessarily that you have to paskin whether it's like this and like this. Could be the Peasach is we don't hold by Rabbi Hill. By the way, the Rebbe used to quote this, and he said, but we don't paskin like Rabbi Hill in the Gemara, because the Rambam says in the end there will be a Mashiach. Said it, but you still have to learn things, and it's under the role of. The interesting thing is he said this in Ramat Aviv, which is a very strong Mishachist enclave.
University.
And not only did it go over well, they loved it. They mamish loved it. They're like, this is a topic we've never.
Oh, so we don't learn like Rabbi Hillel.
We don't paskin this way.
Paskin, we don't.
But it's a
paskin.
sugya that you need to learn. You have to think what it means. That's one of the things about Torah is that I don't necessarily learn because it's over l'asiyata, because at this moment I know what to do with it. I learn because I learn. And that's changing consciousness. Okay. So
Wait, I need, so before everybody goes,